Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ghost Education 101. And today I'm excited to be joined by Nicole. I know we've been trying for a couple months to get you on the show, but things keep getting in the way on both your end and our end. So it's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Third time's a charm, right?
I know, exactly. And I know I have shared your bio on our page as well, but can you just let our viewers know a little bit more about you before we get
Yeah,
started?
absolutely. So, of course, my name is Nicole, and I live in San Diego, California. And so I've had an interest in the paranormal for many years, since childhood. So I've been involved in the field about like 20, 21 years now. Founded the San Diego Paranormal Research Society in 2009. And so it's a journey. It's been a long journey of a lot of investigations and case studies and all of that. I'm also an author as well. I've written several books, including 3 on the RMS Queen Mary, one on San Diego's Most Haunted, Spirits of Rancho Buena Vista Adobe. Let's see, a couple of others. I have some others coming out. And then my team also hosts tours at the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, which is about 25 minutes north of San Diego in Vista, a very active historical adobe up there. And so we've been doing that for about 10 years. Right now they're on hiatus because of course the pandemic. So they should be resuming soon. And then let's see what else. Radio shows. I'm the host of the Afterlife Chronicles on Thursday nights with WLTKDB Thursday nights at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. And then, of course, I produce and co-host Haunted Voices Radio along with Todd Bates, also of the WLTKDB network. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm here right now. So I have to admit I have a little stomach virus, kind of running a little bit of a fever. So it's all good, but I'm going to do this. So,
well, I'm glad you were able to make it tonight. And for those of you watching, we will make sure we share the links so you know how to get a hold of Nicole and where to find everything. And I wish I knew you before I moved from Vegas, because I would have loved to have done the tours that you guys offer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's funny. I used to live in Vegas when I was a little kid. So I was born in Huntington Beach, California, then moved to Vegas, and then my family came back out to San Diego when I was about 7. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
so
we
Vegas
lived there
is a great city.
Yeah, we lived there the last 7 years before finally moving back to Florida to be close to family.
Good for you. Awesome. Florida's, I've been there a couple times. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the weather today was beautiful. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about ghosts.
Well, we can. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. We could bore everybody with the weather. No.
There you go, right?
But before we get started, I do want to thank everyone for joining us in the comments. Feel free. And if my light falls over, it's because my dog just jumped up on the platform I have it set on. So that's why it's kind of shaking. Sorry about that. But feel free to ask any questions. And once Nicole is done with her presentation, we will go through those and get them answered for you. And it doesn't even have to be about this presentation. You can ask any questions about the paranormal. I'm sure Nicole would be more than happy to help answer them. As you guys know, I am. And
I'll try.
Or try. That's the best we can do.
Yeah.
So whenever you want to get started, today's presentation was Paranormal 101, or was it the importance of paranormal research? I can't remember.
I title it Paranormal Investigation and Research 101. Okay. So it's just kind of an overview of a bunch of stuff. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see, it should be okay. Wait, it's not letting me do it here. Let me see here. I can go to slides. I'm wondering how I can pull up. No, I don't have slides. I'm wondering why it's not allowing me to share.
Because I know, I guess we should have run through this before we started.
Yeah, no, see, maybe it's different because I know, like, when I go in here, it's there's an applications and then there's a desktop, and I'm not seeing that desktop.
Right. Yeah, I know when I do it, usually I'll open up my presentation on another screen, and then I do screen share, and then you can select a window to share.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now. Okay. So share screen. Let's see here. And then it's entire screen. Let's see. Windows. No, it's not. Yeah, it's not allowing me. Darn, I had a really nice PowerPoint too. Oh man. Yeah, it's saying go to system preferences. Let me see here.
Well, if it doesn't work, I guess while you introduce it, if it'll email.
I'm sorry, what now?
I was going to say, you could either email it to me real quick while you start with like a mini introduction of it, and I can get ready to pull
Yeah,
up.
let me go ahead and do that. It might take, let me go ahead and email it, and then I can
Okay.
actually just do a little bit more of an introduction. Sorry about this. Normally I've
That's no
done it
problem.
and where there's the desktop window, and that's how I've done it in the past, but I don't see
Okay.
that. So let
Okay. And I
me,
just put my email in the private chat for you.
okay, so let me go ahead and copy. Sorry, guys. So, yeah,
Heck happens.
just bear with us. Bear with us. You know what? Life is a weird thing. Okay. All right. So I'm pasting that in. Again, thank you so much for having me
No problem.
tonight.
And
I'll just
while
put
we're
PPP
waiting,
so
I
you
can.
know.
Okay, yeah, I can do a quick
Yeah, go
introduction
ahead.
for our next presentation on May 25th.
Absolutely. Go
For
ahead and
those
do
of you
that.
who, no problem. For those of you who don't know, I have a book coming out called Haunted Southern Nevada Ghost Towns, and I will be putting together a presentation on May 25th and sharing it with you guys with some more details on what you can expect to find in the book.
Awesome. Yeah,
So,
congratulations. So okay, so of course my file's too large for me to send it. So
okay,
yep. So of course I don't know what we're gonna do here, but what I can do is just pull it up so I have it on my end
okay,
real quick. Let's see here. And then yeah, sorry about that. I don't know, because normally, like I said, I see that desktop window I've
right,
done before, and I
yep,
don't see that. And so anyways, again, like we kind of did this at the beginning. I gave a little bit of an introduction, but just a little bit about this presentation. And I've given this presentation uh, a few times virtually now, especially during with the pandemic and everything. But also, I've done a lot. I've given this at classes and different conferences and different events in person, which is a lot of fun. So it's designed. It's an overview of some things if I were entering the field of paranormal investigation and research, things that I would want to know. So that's basically what the presentation is, just an overview of some topics, general paranormal investigation, methodologies, techniques, a little bit on equipment and some other things. So we'll get into that. Again, at the beginning, I said I'm the founder of the San Diego Paranormal Research Society here in San Diego, founded it in 2009. And so we specialize in ghosts, spirits, and hauntings in that category. So we do investigations and case studies at private residences, businesses, historical locations. We also, like I said, mentioned the tours at the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, and I have a slide on that I'll, well, you guys can't see it, never mind, that we do the third Friday of each month. Again, like I said, it's on hiatus because of the pandemic, but Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, very historic adobe up in Vista, California. And so the tours are designed to give guests a look at the history and the paranormal phenomena of the location. So we have two tours on the third Friday, one at 7 p.m. and one at 9:30. And so we take guests through the property. We do share a little bit about the team. Guests have an opportunity to participate in dowsing rod sessions, ITC sessions, EVP sessions, and so forth. So it's a lot of fun. And the proceeds actually go toward the Adobe, which is nice. So it helps to kind of help them with upkeep and all of that. Let's see. And then, of course, we offer presentations and things like that. You can go to our website, SanDiegoParanormalResearch.com. And then I mentioned a little bit that I'm an author as well. Also write for Paranormal Underground magazine, paranormalunderground.net. It's a great magazine. They have all kinds of different articles on pretty much all the branches of the paranormal. Lots of good writers and lots of neat little articles there. So paranormalunderground.net. And then again, radio shows with WLTKDB.com. That's the station call letters, if you will. So I have my show. I debuted it October 8th, 2020. I can't believe it's going to be almost 2 years coming up here. And so on the network. And so that's Thursday night for 1 hour, 6 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern. So again, I featured guests from all areas of the paranormal, afterlife research as well, NDE, near-death experiencers, psychic mediums, you name it. So that's Thursday nights. And then, of course, Haunted Voices on Tuesday nights, same time slot, 6 p.m., 9 Eastern with Todd Bates. So you can go to WLTKDB.com. or theletstalk.com as well, and that'll get you to the station. And then my website, authornicolestrickland.com. You can go there. I have all my different presentations that I do and some classes that I offer. Pretty much, if you want to get to know me, that website's there for you. So, enough about me. Let's get into this presentation. So, I like to start out with, and I mentioned this earlier, that I've had an interest in the paranormal as far back as I can remember. In my when I was like 3 or 4, it was as far back as I can remember. I've always had that innate curiosity about the unknown. And going back, I can remember having experiences in Las Vegas and in the house that we lived in on Peppermill Drive. And so I, middle school, high school, and college, read up on it and was still that innate curiosity stayed with me. But it was actually a very profound encounter with my grandmother's spirit that occurred my senior year at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. That one experience actually catapulted me from just reading about it, reading books on it, and things like that, to actually being out in the field and doing active investigation of the unknown. So I'll try to keep this short. So my grandmother, my mom's mom, so my maternal grandmother, actually uh, called me the night before she passed. And so it was weird because I answered the phone and she was like, Nicole, are you okay? I just want to make sure everything's fine. And I thought, well, this is odd. I mean, what a random phone call. I mean, she never calls me to ask if I'm, okay in this context. I'm like, yeah, grandma, I'm fine. I'm just busy with classes and all of that. And I talked with her for maybe about 10, 15 minutes. And then we got off the phone. So fast forward to the next day, my mom called me. So her daughter, my mom, of course, and I could tell by the tone of my mom's voice that something wasn't right. And so she prefaced it by saying, "Sweetheart, I love you." And I knew, I'm like, okay, what happened? And she said, "I'm so sorry, but grandma passed away early this morning." And my grandmother's name was Helen. And so I was devastated. I got the next flight out to San Diego, and my grandmother didn't actually have a funeral. She didn't want it. So it was just a very just close knit immediate family members, and we gathered and kind of threw her a little bit of a ceremony, just immediate family. And so after that, after the weekend, I came back to Tucson. So I believe it was Sunday night. And so for a few days, nothing happened. But then about a week later, I started having these really weird, odd experiences in my apartment that I had never encountered prior to her death. So the first things I noticed were specifically the front doorknob, and then my bedroom doorknob would rattle, it almost as if someone was trying to open the door. And I thought, well, this is odd. But then I thought, well, I live in an apartment. This is vibration. This is my neighbors. I didn't even give it much thought. Interestingly, my grandmother and her husband as well used to at night go around the doors and make sure they were locked. So again, I didn't think much of it. And then a couple of nights later, I was sitting on my bed, I think typing a paper, if I remember correctly, and I felt a disembodied hand caress my face. Now, I didn't see anything, but I felt it, and it felt like it came from someone that was very close to me and someone very dear. And so that's when I started to connect the dots, like, okay, could this possibly be Helen communicating with me? Again, I really didn't give it that much thought. Then a few more days passed by. Again, I was in my room doing schoolwork when all of a sudden, out of my left peripheral vision, I saw a figure, and I looked, and it was my grandmother, about 10 years younger, wearing one of her favorite house dresses. She looked very healthy, very vibrant. She didn't say anything, slight smile on her face. And then it almost looked like there was like a spotlight shining against her back. So almost like it gave her this halo, if you will. So that's when I connected the dots, and I'm like, okay, well, either this is a bereavement hallucination on my part, or this is my grandmother's coming to me. I don't know. So I called my mom, talked to her, told her about it. And my mom and I, even though we were a state apart, openly talked with Helen and let her know that the family's okay. She doesn't need to worry about them. Everyone's fine. And, you're free to do and go where you wish. So after that, the experiences did stop. However, now some 20 years later, she does come around, specifically around anniversaries and holidays and things like that. So, to this day, I really do believe in my heart that it was her and that she did come to me. But part of me still questions, like, could this have been some sort of me projecting it because I was grieving, I don't know. So that one experience really, really catapulted me into actual investigation of the unknown. And so that's when I started investigating with different teams in Southern California, got some experience, got to know people, and then fast forward to founding the San Diego Paranormal Research Society, and the rest is history. So just a little bit of a story there, and I had a picture on my PowerPoint slide. It's I think I was about 1.5, and she's holding me. It's a really cute picture. But anyways, moving on. And again, there could be like 15 or 20 different presentations that could branch off from this one. There's a lot of information, but again, it's stuff that when I entered, I would like to know. So it's a lot. So, but more geared toward like an overview. So traits of a paranormal researcher. So when I think of traits, you don't have to have a specific, necessarily a specific background. Pretty much people from all walks of life can contribute to the field. So things that come to mind: professionalism, being a respectful person, having that passion to want to study and to want to investigate and learn about the unknown. If you're in this field and you really don't want to be, but you're in it for a different reason, then I would sit back and ask yourself, maybe, to reflect on why you're in it. Being able to work with other people, leaving ego at the table, having an honest, humble sense to you. It's very time. It's a huge commitment to work in this field. A lot of us that are in know the time that it takes, not just on our 8-hour investigations, or if we're doing case studies and we're at a location for several months or weeks. It's time consuming, from the interviews and the data review and the case report writing and all of that, and the adjunct historical and research that goes into it. So you want to be committed, and it's important that you are okay with accepting constructive criticism from others, because that's how we learn. Where when you have a team, it's a collective work, a network of people. So everyone's going to bring something to the table. So accepting that constructive criticism, and then having that open mind. So those are some traits that come to me for those that are interested in wanting to get involved in the field, having those sorts of traits. So when you think of the paranormal, there's different branches of it. So we have ghosts and hauntings, we have psi phenomena, we have ufology, psychic mediumship, cryptozoology, let's see here, demonology, study of the occult. So there's all these different branches. So real quickly going through them, ghosts and hauntings, well, that's pretty much known. It's the study of different types of ghosts and earthbounds and spirits, and investigating haunted locations. So whether it's a historic site or a business or a private home, that's what that specialization is. And this is going through it very quickly. Psi phenomena, the parapsychological study of psychic phenomena. So getting into ESP and telepathy and psychokinesis, which we'll get into in a little bit, psychometry, things like that. Ufology is a big one. The study of and research into UFOs and alien species. A lot of people are very, very intrigued with that. I mean, this goes back to like the 1890s, when there were mystery airships spotted. The Foo Fighters, for example, that were reported by the World War II airmen. Ghost flyers of Europe and North America. I think they were called ghost rockets of Scandinavia in 1946. And then, of course, with the Condon Committee from 1966 to 1968, it was I believe it was the University of Colorado UFO project. And so that was put together by the United States Air Force. I think it was from, 1966 to 1968, researching with physicist Edward Condon. And then, of course, Project Blue Book, was the code name for the U.S. Air Force study into ufology from, I think it was 1952 to about 1968. So that's another big one. Of course, psychic mediumship plays a big role in what we do in the paranormal. Now it's interesting, and some people and a lot of people cringe at the word science in this field. A lot of people think it's a pseudoscience, which is basically a culmination of beliefs and practices and ideas that claim to be factual and scientific, but don't align with the scientific method. So when you think of paranormal phenomena, it's pretty much events and occurrences that are that exist outside of the norm, if that makes sense. So outside of the scope of scientific understanding. So I'm of the belief that, and there are teams. What I was going to say is there are teams that strictly adhere toward that more. And I know some people cringe at this, but that scientific route where that's all they're paying attention to. They ignore the metaphysic, they ignore the esoteric, they don't really pay attention to intuition. My preference, and this is how I do it, and to give it, I guess, in my opinion, a more holistic balance, is you need to blend your own intuition and your own psychic senses along with the more traditional sense of practicing the field. So I believe blending the two of those can really lend to a lot, and you'll discover a lot more. So, of course, cryptozoology, the study of beings such as like Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, let's see, Chupacabra, Bigfoot. So beings that have not been proven scientifically. I have some notes here so I don't forget. Uh, so legendary animals, investigation of the unknown that haven't really been proven scientific, whose origins haven't actually been discovered. So that's a big one. I know Bigfoot's huge now in the field. So other species, the Mothmen. Let's see what else I said. Yeti. Let's see. Loch Ness, I said, Jersey Devil, for example. So cryptozoology is a big one. Of course, demonology, the study of uh, demons, which are thought to be non-human discarnate entities, demon hierarchy, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the study of the occult, of course, which is esoteric supernatural beliefs. So, and you're, Heather, you're really involved in the occult as well. So I think I read that it was actually, oh gosh, it became popular with a book, and I'm forgetting the author's name. I want to say it was Colin Wilson's, I want to say it was in the 1970s, called The Occult. And so that term became popular. But astrology, alchemy, things concerning magic, so esoteric practices. So you have all these different branches of the paranormal, and some people investigate all of them. Some people, like myself, specialize more in maybe one or two. So it's up to you. But if you're entering this field, I would really kind of read up on and talk to people that have experience in the different branches. And so let's see. So let's go into spiritualism a little bit. So this was, now before that there were movements before spiritualism, but spiritualism really fueled a lot of people's interest in the unknown. So it was a new religious movement, 1840s to 1920s, that proposed that ghosts, spirits of the deceased existed and could communicate with the living. So it commenced in the 1840s, sorry. And I want to say the western central regions of upstate New York. And so there were earlier religious movements, Millerism and Mormonism, that emerged during the Second Great Awakening. But many people who resided in these areas of upstate New York believed in direct contact with God or angels, and started to believe a lot in contacting spiritual energies. So the spiritualist movement believed in three things. They felt that the afterlife is a place where spirits can grow and evolve, that contacting spirits is possible, and that they are more advanced than humans. And three, they can help to relay knowledge and information about morals, ethics, and God. So a lot of different people, psychic mediums started to emerge. Spirit photography came to be during this time. You probably, and again, I have a whole entire presentation on spiritualism. So I'm just giving you the bare nuts and bolts here. So the Fox sisters, you can't talk about spiritualism without talking about them. So this entire movement, and a lot of fraud occurred with photography. A lot of people, there were a lot of copycats. It just became this like circus of everything. So, but it really, the benefit of it is that it actually helped fuel people's desire in the unknown and in the paranormal. And from that came the Society for Psychical Research, which is still in existence today. Its website, I believe, is, I have it written down here, it's www.spr.ac.uk. I actually did a virtual presentation. Well, no, actually, no, not for this. I was thinking it was Society for Psychical Research, but it was ASAP. Never mind. So the SPR, as it's known, came to be from the spiritualist movement. It formed in London in 1882, and it was the first scientific organization to examine claims of psychic phenomena, and paranormal phenomena. So it was formed to try and disprove a lot of the fraudulent activities that occurred during the spiritualist movement using scientific analysis. So they investigated claims of telepathy, intuition, claims of apparitions, different hauntings, phantasms of the living, actually by Frank Podmore. And there was another author as well, I'm blanking on that name, wrote in his entire 2-volume study and had an analysis of something like 700 plus personal psi experiences. So generally, it established this really good framework for the study of anomalous phenomena that's still in existence today. And that is adopted in today's paranormal research. So it obviously conducts field work in the study of anomalous phenomena. So again, go to the website. They have all kinds of different articles on there, annals and annals of historic research and different research on the paranormal. So let's see, moving into, as I mentioned earlier, I I specialize more in the ghosts and hauntings aspect, spirits. That's just what my team specializes more into. So when you think of ghosts and spirits, you start to wonder, okay, what are they? All right. So there is, I like to differentiate the two. I sometimes use them interchangeably, but I prefer not to, because I do believe there are two different things. So when you think of a ghost, or another name for it is an earthbound entity, it's an entity that is, for whatever reason, there could be different reasons, it's somehow tied to this plane of existence. It could be due to whether it's unfinished business, maybe there was some sort of trauma, maybe it's by choice. It's an individual case by case basis, but it's the survival of that individual's personality, that individual's essence, but somehow is tied to this plane, whether it's tied to just a location, whether it can travel. Again, it's a different case by case basis. Whereas a spirit, I like to think of as a more evolved entity. So, an entity that somehow can move with free will. So maybe isn't tied to this plane, but can move through the ranks of the afterlife and come back at free will. So that's kind of like the differentiation I like to make when talking about the two. And so a lot of investigators and researchers are asked, okay, well, why do they communicate with the living? Well, I don't think we absolutely know the answers to that. I mean, you can have 10 different ones and they may all have a different reason for communicating. Again, it's a case by case basis. It could be maybe they're trying to share their story. Maybe they want to offer assistance, especially in cases, for example, when family members are dying. Maybe they want to come and help offer assistance during the grieving process. Maybe to keep in touch, maybe to, like I said, share their story about what happened to them, to demonstrate that there is life beyond. So different, all kinds of different reasons. It's never the same for each individual entity. So that's something that I want to point out. And so, with investigating claims of ghosts and hauntings, we wonder, like, well, how is it that, okay, if someone actually passes on and so their physical body ceases, it's thought that their soul can leave the body and that soul lives on forever and ever in the cosmos. So because I actually wrote a book actually called The Afterlife Chronicles, exploring the connection between life, death, and beyond. It's funny, it's the same name of my radio show. That book was supposed to come out in the fall, but it's delayed because of the pandemic. And so I talk a little bit about this in that book. different reasons for so if the soul survives the physical body, how is it that it can maybe communicate with us and vice versa. So something I wanted to talk about, the cosmic reservoir hypothesis, for example, so coined by Professor William James. He says that all things that occurred since the beginning of time are actually deposited in the cosmos, whereby a channeler can access the info. And so it supports why the energetic essence of our individual makeup and the life memories never goes away. So I think that that's interesting too. The living whole soul hypothesis is another. Just some other interesting aspects that I found too with, so for example, University of Arizona, my alma mater, Stuart Hameroff, along with Sir Roger Penrose, they they feel that consciousness is actually deposited at a quantum level. So there's something called orchestrated objective reduction, or called OR, so that it's data that's in the structural constituent of our human cells. This data is deposited at a subatomic level, and so it cannot be destroyed by physical death, and it dispenses out into the universe. Those are two things. So maybe some of that has to do with why, or maybe can answer the reasons as to why are we able to communicate with entities, and not just ghosts and spirits, but other interdimensional beings and so forth. So let's see, moving on here, signs of a haunting. So every location is going to be different, but there might be similarities, of course, and differences between different locations, whether it's a private home or a business or a historical location. So some of the signs of a haunting could have to do with unexplained noises. Let's see, noises within the walls, footsteps that you may hear if you're downstairs, for example, and you're hearing footsteps, or throughout the house, banging sorts of noises. But a lot of this too, and especially with older homes and older buildings, you can go in and you can determine that it's, maybe settling of the building or something like that. So electrical and plumbing sounds, we'll get into EMF and temperature in a little bit. Unexplained shadows. A lot of people will be going about their day in their home, whether it's watching TV or making dinner, for example, and they may see peripheral movement out of their vision. The apportation, things may disappear and reappear. Places that have very rich historical tapestries are usually foundations for paranormal activity. Odd animal behavior, for example, if you have a cat or a dog, and let's say the dog is just going to a corner and is just staring up at it, or barking at something that it looks like he's seeing something, maybe that could be a sign. Places that have antiques, a lot of antiques are also foundations for paranormal activity. Because I'm sensitive and tend to be on the empathic side, it's interesting. Ever since I was a little girl, I'd go into an antique store and never want to stay. Now that I'm an adult, I love antique stores because I love the history, but I always just felt really weird in those, and now I know why. Other reasons, psychokinetic energy and infrasound. We'll get into that in a little bit. So just cold spots, for example, could be another one, or even sometimes hot spots, or just the sense that a lot of people will say that, I'm not really having a lot of experiences, but I just feel like someone's there. So pretty much, again, it's a case by case basis. You may just have one occurrence. I mean, we've done investigations where basically it's just the sounds and that's it. And then sometimes you can determine it's a plumbing issue or a settling issue. In other cases, there's a lot of different situations going on. I know one of the questions on our client interview form, when we interview clients, and our interview form is pretty extensive. There's around 100 questions on there, but we go with the flow of the interview. But one of the questions is, did the experiences that you're reporting start? Well, first off, do you watch a lot of the television shows about the paranormal? And if the answer is yes, did your experiences start from the time you started watching the shows, for example? And if they say yes, that could be a correlation, maybe. So the mind is kind of going on tangents, if you will. And I'm not going to get into the client interview form because that could be an hour just on that. So, kind of moving back into this slide actually should have been moved to earlier, but that's okay. I'll move it for next time. So, those that are interested in breaking into the field of paranormal investigation and research, here's some things that I wish someone would have told me when I decided to actually actively investigate the unknown. I would ask yourself why. So, what are your motivations? Are your motivations because you are a thrill seeker and that's it? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Are you really interested in doing hardcore, in depth research of the paranormal? So ask yourself why. What are your motivations? Take the time to interview and even shadow reputable and experienced investigators. I mean, there are no experts in the field, at least that's my opinion. How can we profess to be an expert in something that's not proven? But there are people that are experienced in it and are specialized in it because of their years of devoting to the field, right? Volunteer on a paranormal research team. Some teams accept members, some don't. Some take volunteers. Join a meetup group. I'm not saying that every single one will be reputable, but you'll know. Just if you see different meetup groups, go talk to people and you'll see whether or not you want to attend different ones. There's actually a really good one in San Diego where I'm in. It's the SD Gap group, San Diego Ghost and Paranormal Meetup Group, and they have different presenters. They have different topics that they discuss, and so it's a really great group to be a part of. Read books. There are so many books out on the different aspects of the paranormal, afterlife research. Conferences, paranormal themed conferences out there. For example, the Oregon Ghost Conference. I'm actually the California coordinator for the largest Pacific Northwest conference, as well as up there Port Gamble Ghost Conference as well. But there's conferences everywhere. You can attend, see the lectures, see the vendors and exhibitors. There's some of them offer classes and seances and things like that. So uh, also radio shows, for example, radio shows and documentaries on the subject. And again, like I mentioned, shadow a paranormal investigator, if you will. There are, for example, tours as well. Now there are tours that are designed more for the theatrical, like for example, ghosts and gravestones. Can you really learn a lot on those? Well, maybe a little bit about the location, but if you're actually doing, if you want to attend tours where they actually treat it like an on-site paranormal investigation, you can learn a lot from those tours as well. So just some things to think about for those who want to break into the field of paranormal investigation and research. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, types of teams. Okay, so every team's different. Some teams strictly adhere toward the traditional black and white, again with this word, scientific sort of approaches. So really paying attention to a lot of what the equipment is telling them, a lot of what the objective data is telling them, data logging of EMF and temperature and ionic energy, for example. And then there are other teams that are maybe more intuitive, that take on more of a psychic mediumship role. Whatever works for you. Again, my it's my personal opinion that blending the esoteric and the metaphysical in with the traditional works best. That's just for me because I'm naturally intuitive. Speaking of intuition, we all have it. Some are more tapped into it than others. I often say that it's like a sport. The more that you're practiced at that sport, the more time you devote to developing your skills, the better you will get at playing that particular sport. So, for me, for example, being exposed in the field, I've always had intuition, I've always been empathic and all of that. But in the last 20 years, I've seen, the clairvoyance and the clairaudience, for example, I'll get to that in a second, and the natural intuition grow and strengthen. And so I think that that's the case for a lot of people. So different types of teams, again, blending the two. Skepticism versus cynicism. These are just some points here. I think having a healthy dose of skepticism is important. If you don't have that, then I'd be like, well, it might be beneficial to kind of open your mind a little bit. And skepticism, a lot of people think, and this is why I'm mentioning, a lot of people think skepticism is cynicism. To me, it's two different things. So someone that's a cynic, for example, could actually be somewhere and see a full-fledged apparition appear before their two eyes, completely full-bodied, manifest it completely and then still try to deny it. Okay, so kind of a difference between the two. I alluded to intuitive versus science. Again, I mentioned this earlier. Well, actually, no, I didn't. I said there are no experts in the field, but I'm asked this a lot, and I'm sure every investigator is. Well, so what's the best piece of equipment out there, which we'll get to in a little bit? There isn't, first of all, there's no such thing as a ghost detector. Okay. Absolutely not. Second of all, the best piece of equipment, there isn't any best piece of equipment other than yourself. Trust your body, trust your senses, trust what your body is trying to tell you on investigations, because that's important. Have that note. A lot of people, oh, I'm not going to take a notepad and a pen or a pencil with me. No way. Please do that. Take those notes down when you're feeling something, or even if it seems like it just doesn't fit into the overall equation, jot it down, because when you go and review and you debrief with other members, you may figure out, oh my gosh, okay, that's why I experienced that. And you're going to be able to connect the dots. So you are the best piece of equipment. That's what I like to tell people. Okay. So moving on, again, ghost, and I had a neat little slide. It's like a picture of a road that kind of branches off and forks off. So you have ghost hunter mentality and paranormal researcher mentality. I'm going to preface this by saying we use the term ghost hunting to describe what we do. I get that. So this, I'm not criticizing people that have the words ghost hunters in their team name or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to allude to is that there is a different psychological mindset between someone who's a thrill seeker and maybe out just wanting to get that excitement and entertainment from encountering something anomalous, versus someone like a paranormal researcher who is really passionate about doing the hardcore in-depth research. So historical, geological, archaeological research, if applicable, client interviews, interviewing different eyewitnesses, investigating for hours on end, doing case studies at a site for weeks or months, and then reviewing that data, listening to your audio recorders, reviewing your photos, reviewing the hours of video footage and all of that, and then trying to piece together what fits from all of that, and then write a case report and all of that. That's very time consuming. So again, just a little bit of a different intent, I should say, between someone who's thrill seeking versus someone who's wanting to delve more into the hardcore research. And there's nothing wrong about thrill seeking. I'm not trying to say that that's wrong, but again, if your main goal is to go to a haunted location to thrill seek, and you want nothing to do with the research end of it, then don't necessarily call yourself a paranormal investigator and researcher. I know that sounds harsh, but that's just my opinion. Moving on. So with that in mind, it's my good friend and co-director actually came up with this term. She calls it paratainment. So I had a slide here, and it's called the paratainment phenomenon. Is it waning? Effects on paranormal research. So we have one of the reasons why the paranormal is so popular these days is because of all, the different shows and how it's featured a lot in media and pop culture, which is, there are pros to that and there are cons. Obviously, common sense tells you what the pros are and, of course, what the cons are. But if someone is wanting to become, let's say, a paranormal investigator based on just watching the shows and that's it, they're doing themselves a disservice, because a lot of what happens on these shows, it does not reflect real life investigation, real life research completely. You may get a glimpse of the types of equipment that are used, how to use them or not how to use them, because sometimes they're not used properly. That's a whole different discussion. Let's see what else. You might get a glimpse into the history of the location, different types of experiments that can be done. But if someone's motivation to get involved in this field is solely based on that they want to be on a TV show, or that they just want to just have a bunch of media attention, then, if that's your only goal, then I would question why you're involved. So just some points here. I think that there are a lot of benefits, and I know a lot of people on these shows, wonderful, wonderful people. But what I'm telling someone who's entering this field is, don't base everything just on what the media says or what television says, because it's not always 100% accurate. So there is a shift in our collective outlook regarding the effects of paratainment and mainstream media on paranormal research. A lot of people nowadays, and a lot of people that I've talked to at least have said, a lot of this sensationalism regarding the paranormal is not really doing a lot to advance the field of paranormal research and maybe offer spirit resolution to those energies that do need help. It, the benefit is that it does motivate people to learn about it, and there's a curiosity there. It sparks people's curiosities. But I'm also of the belief too that there's some weird, and I can't explain it, but there seems to be some weird I call it a cosmic shift. More and more people are wanting to learn about the paranormal. They want to communicate with different energies, but yet it seems as though the afterlife and other realms are desiring to commune and interact with the living as well. So there's this parallel relationship that's going on, which I find really fascinating. Again, I think just the interest is being fueled in so many ways, and so that could be one of the main causes of that. But I think there's something else going on in the cosmos, if you will. Okay, and one thing I want to mention too, when I first started out in the field, I was very much into, and I still am, don't get me wrong, I was very much into, oh my gosh, how many EVPs am I going to get? Am I gonna capture any anomalous photographs and things like that? And that's still great. I'm still fascinated by that. But for me, I'm now left with, even though that's important, that's a component, I'm left with, okay, well, what now? I'm more concerned with, okay, what are the connections and the relationships that I can develop with these energies? What can I learn from them? What can they teach me? So it's kind of moving more into the how and why, if you will. Let's see. So getting into a little bit on, so I'm just going to a little bit on our team, the San Diego Paranormal Research Society's investigation process. And it's probably pretty similar to most teams' processes, if you will. So you have the initial client contact and interview process. So there's a difference between private homes and businesses versus historical locations in this regard, in the sense that a lot of times it's the team's desire to want to reach out to these historical locations and investigate, although some of these historic sites will reach out to teams as well. But with private homes and businesses, it's usually them reaching out to teams because they have some sort of experience going on that they can't explain. So that initial client contact, it can come from word of mouth. It's usually comes through as an email, or they fill out a investigation request form on a website, for example. The interview process is very extensive. We like to do an initial phone interview just to get a general idea of what's going on at the location. And if there are multiple witnesses, we like to interview those separately to avoid suggestibility and bias. And then from that, if it's determined collectively that, we want to move further, then we'll go ahead and go to the site and do more extensive client interviews with those involved. And then usually what we call the preliminary, where we'll go in and draw up a map of a general map for us of the location and some of where the claims are, some of the hot spots. So we have that, any sort of potential areas within the site that could be dangerous for us if we investigate. Baseline photographs of different rooms and different angles of the rooms. You want to take baseline EMF readings, which we'll talk a little bit more about in coming slides, baseline temperature readings, things like that. So it's more of a preliminary, and in that is the supplemental research. So we start to do on-site research of, let's say, the home or the property or the land, things like that. If there's interesting geological aspects, for example, if the home or business sits on a lot of limestone or quartz, we're going to look into that. So it's pretty involved. And then from that going forward, out of all the adults that are at the location, it's just our preference that everyone that's there, if they're in agreement to us coming and actually pursuing an investigation or a case study, then we'll go ahead and do that. But if there's one person that's like, I'm not so into this, then we'll probably hold off until everyone's in agreement, just because we don't want to disturb any sort of dynamic with that home environment or that business environment. So and then you go into the actual investigations, and sometimes you're only allotted a one night stay. It could be 6 hours, 8 hours, and that's it. I feel that to really get a good idea of what's going on at a location, and not just paranormal wise, but if you're doing a private residence, to get a really good idea of the family dynamic, is there anything going on within the home that could be contributing to the phenomena, things like that. You need to do more than one investigation, which, if you're there for a pretty long amount of time, it's considered more of a case study. But sometimes, a lot of times, you just get these one night investigations, and that's great. You can still learn a lot in those hours, but probably not as much as you would if you're there for a long amount of time. So, and I'll get into a little bit more on methodology here in a little bit. But then, so after, the investigations, you go into, okay, well, you have all the results that you have to review. So if you're data logging, let's say, environmental monitoring, EMF, temperature, any sort of radiation, things like that, infrasound, and that, if you're data logging, it's going to graph out those results for you from the time that you're there. So you're going to want to look at that in comparison to any audio captures that you have, any anomalous photographs, anything that's showing up on your surveillance footage, for example. So it's kind of like piecing together a lot of pieces of a puzzle and trying to see what fits, and then also taking the results of those client interviews and those experiences that people have had, and seeing if any sort of your objective data, so what your environmental monitoring is saying, or what, let's say if you have some EVP captures, what that objective data is in comparison to what I call subjective data, which is, let's say someone has a personal experience of being touched, for example, or maybe they saw a shadow figure in the kitchen, for example. So you're trying to piece all these different components of the investigation to try to get a good idea of what may be going on. So it's a pretty extensive process. It's very rewarding, though. And then it takes a long time to review, depending on how long you're there. But let's say you have, for example, let's say you're using like 6 audio recorders, and you're recording 4 hours each. That's 24 hours of audio just right there. Let's say you have a bunch of different static cameras, video cameras on a tripod positioned to film the hotspot locations, as well as an infrared, a DVR surveillance monitoring system. Well, there you go. You're adding a ton of hours of all of that. So it does take a lot of time. That's why I prefer not to take on more than maybe one sort of client at a time per month, just because, plus we work, a lot of people work. They don't just do this. They work, they have full-time jobs or part-time jobs. So it's very time what was I going to say? It's sorry, brain fart there. A lot of commitment. There's a lot of commitment. And so just some notes here. So when not to take on a case. Now this is more for like private residences. And I mentioned earlier, if let's say there are 3 adults residing at the location, and let's say 2 want a team to come out and 1 doesn't, just our preference, we won't until all the adults are in agreement. Or if there's some sort of, where you can tell that there might be some sort of severe physical issue, or any sort of psychological or mental issues that could maybe be exacerbated and made worse by a team coming out, we probably would say no. So really getting an idea of what's going on with the family dynamic. Yes, absolutely. On our case forums, we do ask about medication. Absolutely. And we tell them, this is what you tell us is confidential. It does not go out of this room. So what you tell us, we're not going to tell anyone else. So that client confidentiality is really important, but we explain why we ask about what medications people are on, because a lot of times, if you explain to them, then they're going to understand. So very important. I've talked with some people who are like, yeah, no, we don't ask about meds. Well, we do. It's a big question on our client interview form. And then, of course, follow that golden rule. This is pretty much throughout the entire process. You want to treat others with respect, not just yourself, not just your teammates, but the clients, and of course the energies that you're interacting with. So, I'm not one to believe in provoking or anything like that. For example, let's say you're someone's touched during an investigation, and if you can say something like, "Okay, please, I don't want to be touched, so please don't do that," or when you leave, you know what, you need to stay here if possible. Please don't follow me home. That's fine. But this whole thing about going in and intentionally provoking and antagonizing is something that I don't do. I think it's counterproductive. I think it's rude, and I know in my experience, when you follow that golden rule and you're respectful, you are going to get a lot more than if you're not. Okay. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I'm not going to finish this. My gosh, this is a 2-hour presentation. Well, you know what, Heather, how long do people normally go? Is it like an hour? You said between an hour and two, an hour and a half?
Yeah, they typically will talk for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then the last half hour is for questions.
Okay, so let me see. This is okay. Yeah, this is geared more toward a probably a 2 hour. So if for some reason I don't finish, maybe we could do a part two if
Hmm.
possible. I don't know if that
Yeah.
would work. I know that's weird. It's usually I do these on site, and usually I'm allotted 2 hours. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh
Hmm.
my god, please, already an
Yeah.
hour.
And
Anyways,
maybe next
okay.
time we'll figure out the slideshow issue.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. It's weird though because I don't see that desktop where that's
Hmm.
how I usually access it. So
Right.
I think what we can do for tonight, just maybe I'll stop. I'll do a few more slides and then maybe we could
Hmm.
do a part two if that's fine.
Yep. I'll look at the
Is that
schedule while
okay?
you're continuing. Yep. I'll look at the schedule and see
Okay.
what dates we have open, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know that's jagged, but I'm just there's no, to keep it within the time frame. Okay,
Right. I mean, we
so
could go the full 2 hours, but then there wouldn't be time for questions.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
know exactly, and that part of that's my fault. I should have probably gauged
Mhm.
it a little better. But anyways,
No, no, that's no problem.
okay. So while she's doing that, so moving on. Yeah. So moving on. As an investigator, you you have the investigation, right? So you're doing all of your different types of methodology. You're doing your experimentation. You're having different types of EVP sessions, electronic voice phenomena sessions. You may be doing instrumental transcommunication sessions, some spirit photography, experimentation, of course, environmental monitoring, and all of that. But as an investigator, and as I've evolved, and I'm no expert, believe me, but as I've evolved, I now am also concerned with, okay, let's examine outside of what we get on in the four corners of that investigation. For example, let's examine what else could be influencing the phenomena at a specific location. Is there, and again, I mentioned family dynamics, is there something going on with the family and the people that are living there? Is there bias? Is there suggestibility? Let's say someone had an experience but the rest of the family didn't, but because that initial person who had the experience starts talking about it, then everyone else starts encountering things as well. Maybe are they watching a lot of shows and they're after that they're subconsciously or even consciously looking to, and wanting something to happen. So is that going on? So, in what ways are the clients contributing to the phenomena, if at all? What ways are even the investigators when we go to a location? Is there something that we're doing to maybe inadvertently contribute to the phenomena? Getting into a little bit on magnetism. Oh my gosh, I live near Miramar, and so jets fly around this time of night, so it's really loud. At least it is in my headphones. So nowadays, with all the technology and all the smartphones and all of that, I think that could be one reason why we're seeing a lot of an increase in paranormal activity. But electromagnetism. So when you're on a case, EMF, the big theory with the electromagnetic field is that for whatever reason, it can potentially influence paranormal activity or vice versa, that the activity, the ghosts, the spirits, the entities themselves could be also doing something in their genetic makeup to influence the fluctuation in the EMF field. So with EMF, you're measuring electric and magnetic fields. So on some teams will data log, for example, like I mentioned, and they'll data log and monitor it consistently. And then at the end, you'll have that graph that graphs out pretty much all the readings for from the time you started to the time you finished. And that's interesting too, because you can go through that. And let's say, for example, hypothetically here, at 9:02 p.m., for example, there's this weird spike in EMF. Well, by itself, that doesn't really tell me much. But if we're able to corroborate that, okay, at 9:01 p.m., let's say Allie captured this really unique EVP in the same room, then that could be two pieces of corroboration. So it allows you to kind of look and graph out and see if you can piece together the different pieces of the puzzle. Um, let's see, moving on, temperature as well. It's thought that the wide theory is that, okay, when energies are gaining energy, if you will, and trying to manifest, they're somehow drawing heat out of that environment to do so. So that could explain why there are potential temperature drops. Let's see what else. Ionic energy. So any surface that's charged with static electricity is going to invite ions, and it's I somehow theorized that ghosts are more associated with negative ions. I don't know exactly why that theory was proposed, but it's thought too that on a paranormal investigation, if you're going to use an air ion counter, for example, to measure the air ions, there may be fluctuations. It's thought that just how an entity may fluctuate or manipulate the EMF, it can also manipulate the ionic energy, if you will. And so different meters, some people don't use data loggers. They might use different just static meters, like the Mel meters, for example, or the tri-field meters. And usually there's one person that's monitoring that in the room, for example, if you're not going to be data logging. But we've experimented a couple of times where we put two meters together, for example, maybe one that's measuring magnetic in milligauss and another one that's measuring in volts per meter of the electric, and seeing if okay, well, comparing and seeing, okay, and usually what happens is we get more magnetic readings than we do electric, but experimenting with different types of meters and things like that could really lend to a lot of different further experimentation. Infrasound too is another thing to monitor as well. So when you think about human hearing, we hear at a 20 hertz, right? So anything less than that is considered infrasound. And Vic Tandy, I think he was a British engineer and lecturer. I think he lectured at, I think it was Coventry University in England, I think. And so in 1980, he was working in this lab and he noticed that he at times would start to feel very anxious. He would get sweaty. He would almost feel like he was being watched, just a very general anxious feeling. And he was able to figure out that a fan emitting low level infrasound was the cause of that. And whenever that fan was turned off, those sensations ceased. So I think too, that can be, infrasound can be a big reason. And so if you're going into a private home and people are running fans, even air conditioning units, and there's that low level hum that's going through, and with fans, that could contribute to some of their sensations, and if they're seeing apparitions and things like that. So infrasound, I think, is something that definitely needs to be monitored a little bit more. Radiation's another one, so there could be disruptions in the radiation. So Geiger counters are used for that. Let's see, geomet weather is another one. Weather, lunar phases. It's thought, with full moons, that's thought to increase or play into paranormal activity. Usually from, I would say, September to December is usually when a lot of people have or report more odd phenomena. And of course, there's the thought that the veil thins between our world and the next. So lunar phases, geomagnetic storms, for example, that can play into potentially causing or increasing different paranormal activity. Solar storms, for example. I know with geomagnetic storms, it disrupts the Earth's magnetic field. So that could be a reason. And then solar flares can also kind of disrupt and cause like that magnetic shift. So all these different things that can influence what's going on at a location. Of course, history Like I said, if there is a location that is very rich in history, has a very rich historical background, that right there can be a very prime foundation for why that site has paranormal activity. Psychokinesis is another one, or PK, if you will. So it's the mind's ability to influence an object without any sort of physical movement. And so it was coined, I believe, by Henry Holt. I believe in 1914, he talked about it in his book on the cosmic relations. So when you think about nowadays, all these different haunted locations, prisons, theaters, ships, battlefields, let's say 20 years ago, or even before that, yes, there probably were anomalous phenomena that occurred, but if there's more reports of it now at those locations, well, is it just because randomly just the paranormal activity is increasing, or is it because of the scores and scores of people going in week after week, month after month, investigating, and that's playing into it? So these are all kind of things I think about. Tulpas and thought projections. I'll talk a little bit about that. We already talked a little bit about media and pop culture. So going on tulpas now. So this is something interesting, and it's I actually wrote an article on it as well. I think a couple of years ago, and so it's on my website. It's all about tulpas and their influences and implications in paranormal research. So a tulpa is an entity which is formed and brought into existence by immense amount of thought and concentration. Okay, so it causes that idea or that thought or that myth to come alive, if you will. So it's a Tibetan word that means manifestation or emanation. So an example would be Shangri-La. We've all heard of Shangri-La as depicted in James Hilton's novel Lost Horizon. So what sorts of tulpas could be caused in the field, if there's a lot of focus, so you could play into what I just said. If there's a lot of focus going in, if people are going into a location and they're thinking, okay, I'm gonna have this experience. This is what I'm gonna see. I'm gonna see this apparition. I'm gonna do that. That could be forming and creating its own life form. I mean, something else, maybe an example, as well as one big tulpa being formed by mainstream media portraying the spirit world as inherently evil and malevolent. Now, I don't want to criticize people that are demonologists or that investigate malevolent claims. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm trying to criticize, but a lot of times, out of all the alleged reports of actual malevolent or demonic activity, what percentage of those are actually really demonic activity? Probably not a high amount of percentage. So is there one big tulpa being formed about from media's focus on this? So people are going in, maybe they're watching the shows, they're being told, okay, you know what, spirit world is evil, it's mean, you're going to have all these negative experiences. So now they're going with that thought, and then all of a sudden they're starting to report more negative sorts of experiences. And I will say, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've gotten more of a preponderance, I would say, an increased amount of emails from people really believing that what they have in their home is truly something evil and wicked. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but it makes me wonder. So, just an increase in private residence requests with alleged demonic activity. Well, why is that? Okay, it could be partly because of that, and maybe other reasons as well. So again, knowing those authentic signs between truly what a malevolent entity is versus maybe something negative. And maybe I'm getting a little bit too involved with semantics here, but I like to kind of differentiate the words malevolent and negative. I've used them interchangeably. I know others have, but for me, malevolent is something with an innate intent to be harmful, an innate wicked sense, whereas negative could just be an experience that someone deems negative. Maybe it's not the intent of the entity. So let's say someone's at a site, and let's say they were maybe pushed, and maybe it wasn't the intent of the entity to actually push that person. It's the human person that's ascribing that that belief that that was their intent. So negative and malevolent, I think, should be definitely differentiated. I think of negative more as maybe like a lower level entity. So let's say it's an earthbound of someone who maybe wasn't a real nice person in life and maybe is repeating those same traits in spirit form, for example. Whereas malevolent is something, oh my gosh, something truly to be afraid of. So let's see, moving on here. Let's see, a little bit more thoughts on this. Kind of a repeat, but I have a slide on here. There were some slides too of showing different types of pictures of equipment and things like that, environmental monitoring, but you guys can't see that. So we'll figure that out for next time, hopefully. So investigating now, and I said earlier, just a little bit ago, all these places now that are being investigated and researched by team after team after team. I tend to think outside the box a lot. And so let's say you have a location. Let's use Waverly Hills Sanitarium, for example, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. It was a tuberculosis hospital. I've researched there. It's phenomenal. Very, very prevalent with shadow entities and things like that. So let's go back to the very first paranormal encounter or sighting or report there. And then now let's fast forward to, let's say, however many years later. Out of all the reports that are of that location that are existing now, what percentage of those reports are actually truly an authentic paranormal incident versus maybe a false haunting? So a false haunting, which is not really, it's a projection from the investigators, so it's false. It's not really real in the sense of being a real type of phenomenon, but it's something that is caused from the investigators or from the living. So and I'd like to think that that's happening a lot, especially when more of these places are investigated more and more and more and more. You might have more of a percentage of, okay, well, there may be some incidences that actually aren't, they may seem paranormal, but they aren't really, and they might have other explanations. So again, trying to piece together all these different pieces. I think of a puzzle, all these scattered pieces of a puzzle, trying to see if you can piece them together. You may be able to, you may not. Some may seem to fit, and maybe they don't. Maybe they're close to being fit, but it's very interesting to try to work that out. Let's see here. Okay. So I already kind of went on that. Let's see, how much time do we have? Maybe 10 more minutes. Okay, let's move on a little bit to, okay, when you're investigating or doing case studies, you're wanting to enter the field and work and research these different sites, whether they're businesses, homes, historic sites. Pareidolia is definitely something to know about. Pareidolia is a psychological phenomenon involving a vague and random stimulus. Usually it could be a photo or a sound that is perceived as being real, but really isn't. So it's the mind's ability to make order out of what it's seeing and hearing. So for example, looking at the clouds and seeing objects or animals, for example, in the clouds. Hidden mess. So the mind is making out. I always think of like Charlie Brown when they're, I think, on the baseball mound and they're like looking up at the sky and they're like, oh, I see this and I see that. Well, that's not really what it is, but it's that the mind's ability to try to make reason out of what it's seeing. Pay attention to that, because there can be audio pareidolia, there could be photographic pareidolia, for example. And this is when I review audio, I try not to review it for more than 20 or 30 minutes per segment. Then I like to take a little bit of a break. But even with audio, let's say you capture something, you make a clip of it. If there's a question before the capture, you want to include that in the clip. But let's say you're listening to it over and over and over, trying to make sense out of what it's saying. You're eventually going to hear things that may not be there naturally. So pay attention to that. Apophenia is very similar to it, where you're trying to find meaning between two or more unrelated events. So really, really pay attention to that, because the mind's ability is strong and it can really mess with you and interfere. Okay, so let's see. I'm looking at the time here. This might be a good place to stop because the rest of this is basically communicating with the spirit world and other realms. So traditional scientific, there's that word again, methods, esoteric metaphysical methods. So getting into electronic voice phenomena, instrumental transcommunication, paranormal vigils, using different metaphysical tools. Let's see what else here. So really getting into that. The Estes method, ITC method, which is a sensory deprivation method. Let's see, audio review, spirit photography, a little bit talking about orbs and things like that. And then I have some photographs to share, obviously, when we get the slides to work next time, and then some audio, and then getting into videography and types of videography and other sorts of esoteric methods. So this might be a good place to stop, and then we can maybe do a part 2.
Okay.
So
And before we end the show, I'll give you a couple different dates and we can pick one out and book it and let everyone know beforehand if you're available.
Oh, thanks for doing that, because this is like, whoa, like it's already
No,
like
I appreciate
7:16.
you doing this.
Of course, yeah. I'm just not 100% on my game. Are you there? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not 100% on my game because, I'm kind of running a fever and all that, but you do what you can with it. So
right. Yeah. And here I am. I'm trying to message my husband because our dog was having a stomach episode down here without getting too graphic.
Oh no, you should have told me.
No, it's fine.
Oh my God, you should have told me. I would have stopped.
But watching him clean up after the dog was quite hysterical.
Oh no, you should have told me.
So that's why I was laughing. If anyone saw me I was trying not to laugh on camera, okay. But if that's why anyone saw me laughing, that's why.
What is going on with stomach problems today? My Lord.
Well, we treated her to a milkshake, and normally she does really good with vanilla milkshakes, but tonight not so much.
Oh, poor baby. What kind of dog do you have?
She's a mini Australian Shepherd.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh.
Yep. She's a sweetheart, and she sits by me the whole time I'm doing my shows.
Oh, I love it. I just love it. That's my cat Kaylee passed in December, and she would do that too. She would jump up on the desk or be on the bed, and I just have pictures of her now. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, one of my shows, because we do also have a cat. It was one of my first shows with Philip, and the cat decided to jump up from behind me over my keyboard and scared the crap out of me.
Oh my God, I love it.
It was quite humorous. But before I get to the questions real quick, I do want to say when it comes to the word scientific, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because my ultimate goal, because my PhD is in paranormal scientific studies.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention, I'm actually going to be pursuing a degree in parapsychology just for me.
Yes.
Just for me, yep. Just for me. So,
but it's a lot of good information. And, I'm a firm believer that no matter where you get your education from, as long as you're taking the time to learn it.
Thank you. Exactly.
And you've researched it and it's a reputable place that you're getting it from. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with continuing with education, but when it comes to science, I really want the scientific method to be used in the paranormal field.
I do too.
But you got to add there's got to be a space in there for that personal experience.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just a matter of tweaking it for this field.
Yeah.
And what makes my skin crawl is when people call it a pseudoscience.
I don't like it either. I used it because people use it, but I don't like it either. I can't stand it. Yep. I can't either. I'm like, oh, yeah.
I'm like, no, it's not a pseudoscience.
It's not really when you think about it. It's absolutely. Right. I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree.
Yeah, it's just not your main. I mean, I guess that does fall under pseudoscience because it's not your mainstream.
Right.
But it can be taken just as serious as someone in physics or chemistry.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. There's so many different. I mean, we have to look. And I would like, and I forgot to mention this. I would like to have more monitoring of the physical body on cases like heart rate and EEGs and breathing and blood, because that could maybe, you never know what we could discover with that. So
right. And that's one thing I didn't think of until I did a show a couple weeks ago and we were chatting back and forth, and someone who was watching it said that they use their smartwatch to monitor their heart rate and everything throughout the entire investigation. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? So now it's like,
right.
I have it all charged and ready to go.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I would sit there and buy a little portable EKG and wear it. I don't care, because you never know what that you could develop new theories with that and, patterns and things like that.
I have a portable blood pressure cuff that I'm going to also start bringing to different investigations. So it's, think outside of the box. You never know what you can consider to bring with you.
That is absolutely true on that.
Okay.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yes, I do agree that personal experiences do need to be treated as personal experiences.
That's absolutely it.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And we don't have many questions. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. We still have plenty
Absolutely.
of time to get through them. Philip had asked earlier in the show, can you still spend the night on the Queen Mary?
Yes, you can, but it is closed, obviously, because of the pandemic. So when I know information, you guys will. But from what I've heard, that it is, they do want to open it sometime in the fall of this year. So they've started the very urgent repairs that need to be done. So lifeboat removal is the big one that they're working on now. Well, the lifeboats are removed. But yeah, so it's probably sometime, I would think maybe like September, October of this year. But yep, spend the night.
Okay.
It's a functioning hotel. I've done it how many times? I don't even know, but it's great.
Yep. Yeah, we always would see it whenever we would take a cruise out of Port Canaveral, or not Port, Florida ports.
I know what you mean.
Long
Yeah.
Beach.
Yes, I just right there. Yep. Cape Canaveral. I've been there many years ago.
Yep. Yeah, that's where we sail out of now. But as soon as we get back on a cruise ship, I miss cruising.
I know. I know. I haven't gone on one in so many years. Geological Survey, USGS is one of them. There's a couple others too that I'm blanking on, but that's one of them. Yeah, so USGS, I believe it is. Yeah, and there's a couple others too, and I'm blanking on what they are. I'm sorry. I'll when I remember, I'll let them know. I'll be like, oh, here they are.
Yeah. I've had there was one day I just couldn't come up with anything, and I just ended the show early because I'm like, I can't even think of anything. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. It all
couldn't
happens.
remember
I'm a
anyone's name.
mess tonight. Like I am just all over the place. Like, oh my God, please.
Steve wants to know, at what point does a spirit gain electromagnetic energy when entering the afterlife? Is there a switch of energy somewhere?
You know what? Honestly, if I had I don't think we know the answer to that. We don't, because I'd be a fraud if I sat there and said, yeah, I know the answer to that. I imagine that, there is some sort of shift when the physical body ceases to function and the soul somehow exits the body, would there be a lessening of it? Maybe an increase? It's hard to know. I know this is kind of off topic, but I know that they've done studies where they've weighed human bodies prior to death, and then after death there's a few ounce difference. So that could be maybe the weight of the soul, if you will. I don't know, but that's a good question though. I wish we could really zero in on that. There's just so many unknowns, but to me that's what makes the field so fascinating, is that unknown. So
okay, and that is actually it for questions.
Oh yeah, and
they're being quiet tonight.
No, well, I was really bad at promoting it, so that's my fault. I need to, for next time, I'll promote it more. That was my bad.
Okay. And actually, while we're sitting here, real quick, and then that way we can announce when. I don't know if you have your calendar with you or not.
I do on my phone. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Okay. Yeah, it's so funny because I do this particular presentation a lot in person, and it's usually an hour and a half to 2. And so, but then sometimes when I start talking, I think of examples, and then 2 minutes for that, and before you know it's like an hour. So this probably should have been a 2-parter to begin with. So I do apologize. Let's see. Okay, so I have my.
And it's funny because I have a lot of people say, "How can you guys fill in 2 hours?" And then before they know it, the show's over.
I know, right? I'm telling you, it's craziness.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so I have. Let's see here. Yeah, I have mine open. So whenever.
Okay, we have June 22nd.
I can do that. Same time, right?
Yep, same time.
Okay, so I guess it'll just be like a part 2 to this, and like I said, it gets more into the methodologies and things like that, spiritual protection. Yeah, and then maybe some I'll figure out the slides too, because that's weird, because when I've done StreamYard before and I'll hit share screen, usually there's a desktop window, but I didn't see that, so I'll have to figure it out for next time.
Yeah. I'll check on my end too, in case there was a setting, but I didn't think there was one on my end to like block it, because I didn't see anything when I went through it real quick.
Right, it's probably on my end. So oh well.
Yep.
But yeah, so that'll be it.
If not, what I can do is I can create a folder on Google, and you can upload the slides there.
Oh, that's
in case it doesn't work.
Okay, that might be something to do. Yeah,
we have it as a backup.
Right. Okay. That'll be good. Okay, so June 22nd at 6 p.m. mine, so 9 Eastern yours. Perfect.
Yep.
That'll be good. And I'll make sure to promote it more. I apologize. It's just been crazy.
No problem. Okay, well, I'm going to wait to see if a few more questions come in while I finish up announcing some of the
Sure.
shows, because for
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks I've been announcing my an inside look into Southern Nevada ghost towns, but I messed up. So the next show on May 25th is actually going to be an open discussion with returning guest Reverend Sean Whittington from Las Vegas. He will be joining us in 2 weeks. And then my look inside haunted Southern Nevada ghost towns will be on June 8th. Or did we just... No, you're 22nd. Okay.
Yeah, no, I see it. It says June 8th. Oh, that's great.
That's the kind of night I'm having. I'm like, didn't we just book you?
Welcome to my world. I was all over the place tonight, but you know what? Oh, well.
And then on June 22nd, we'll have you back. And
yeah, that'll be great.
Okay, hold on real quick. Philip's commenting about it. He says USGS has changed. Before you could use longitude and latitude to find a location, but now you just have to kind of zoom into an area.
Yeah, no, I've noted exactly. There's a couple others too that there's a team that I know up in the Pacific Northwest that I have to ask them what they use because it's a couple that I wasn't aware of that they use. So I'll ask, and then when I get that information, I'll let you know. But yeah.
Whoops. There we go. Okay, perfect. Well, we
Awesome.
will, I guess, unless you have anything else you want to share. I know you've let everybody know where they can find you. But if you want to share that again real quick before we close out, that would be great.
Sounds good. So my main site, authornicolestrickland.com, just a little bit about me, my books, radio show, speaking, different speaking topics and classes and things like that. And then our team's website, San Diego paranormalresearch.com is that. And then, of course, WLTKDB site, like I said, is WLTKDB.com, or I believe he still has the letstalk.com. So both of those go to the same site. And then I'm on Facebook, author Nicole Strickland, Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond. SDPRS is on there as well, just the acronym SDPRS. Twitter, SDPRS Nicole. And then Instagram, author Nicole Strickland. So
perfect. Well, thank you so much again
for
joining us, and I'm looking forward to part 2.
Me too. Yeah, I know. I was looking at the time like, whoa, okay. Yeah, that'll be great.
Yep, sounds great. And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.